What is going on, everybody? We are back with the Residual Earners Podcast, episode 33, and we are bringing you a one-of-a-kind guest today, one of our favorite people on this earth. I'm Jordan.
I'm Presley.
And I'm going to let Presley do the intro to his best friend in the whole wide world.
You know, I've been looking forward to this.
I have too. Long time coming.
The other thing I'll say is 33?
33 episodes.
Jeez, it just seems like a couple of weeks ago you said, let's do a podcast.
I know, and now we have purple little foams and purple cords.
Hey, I got a question.
We're always upgrading.
Did you guys notice the cords and the microphone covers? Just wondering if y'all noticed that.
It's kind of things that make us happy.
This was a big deal to Jordo,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to see if anybody noticed
Okay, we
it.
got a big deal sitting to your right, so
Oh.
don't make me do it.
All right, guys, it is, we are blessed and highly favored to have my best friend in the whole world here. This guy hails from DeQueen, Arkansas. Phenomenal businessman, phenomenal networker. I'll say this, he entered Grant Cardone's Great American Speak Off. And out of 30,000 people, he went through several levels and was the runner-up out of 30,000 people. Guys, an amazing speaker, an amazing leader, an amazing networker. I could go on and on. He's also an amazing husband, father, and grandfather. So, you know, before his head gets too big and that cowboy hat pops off, let me welcome to the screen Mr. Randy Hedge.
You know, the only part you left out was an amazing best friend. Like kind of the most important there. I thought this purple was in honor of me being here. You know, purple is the color of royalty, right?
Well, we brought it out for you.
I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be a great time.
We're going to have some fun here. You know, Randy, no joke, he's my best buddy. We've known each other the year before they discovered dirt, I think is when we met. Yeah. And we have now known each other for decades. It's hard to say that. And he's kind of like a second dad to Jordo. So it's going to be a lot of fun here. We're going to just sit here and kind of chit-chat. This is going to be a life lessons kind of podcast. So
definitely. And I think we're starting with life lessons, but we're going to do overall probably 4 different episodes. So the next month, guys, we are so blessed to have Randy coming every single week. We're filming all today, Randy. You don't have to come back.
Well, wait a minute. I need to get with my agent. I don't remember agreeing to 4.
Payments in the mail. Payments in the mail.
It was small print on that contract, buddy. Small print on the contract.
So, yeah, I think episodes 33, 34, 35, 36 will all be the one and only famous TikToker, extraordinary businessman, Randy Hedge.
Yeah, and we actually have Reagan Rue here today also. Yeah. Reagan is kind of, she's our kind of our leader as far as making things look right and look good and all that.
And Reagan will be episode 37.
I know it. Yes. Yeah. So we'll be talking about how to get customers through social media and branding and SEO and all that sort of stuff with Reagan. Well, all right, let's get going here. All right, it's life lessons. Randy, start spewing some out, man. People want to know some life lessons, would you?
Be careful if you ever agree to a podcast with residual earners.
Read the fine print forever showing up on property.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the first thing is I want to give my disclaimer. I have not ever had an original thought my whole life. Everything that I am, everything that I share, I've heard from someone, from you, from my daddy, from my granddaddy, from my grandkids, from Marcy, from Reagan, from Jordo. It's just I've been able, fortunately, to listen to a few wise people, to have some great mentors in my life. And I really believe that's what the life lessons are about, is passing down the things that have been given to you, good and bad. Now, the reality is that became very important to me when I defined my purpose. When I realized my whole purpose, I think the reason God put me here is to try to leave it a little better than I found it. Whether that's just for one person or a community or a tribe, you know, whatever it is you're doing, just make every day a little better because you were a part of it. We all know those people when they walk in the room, you're excited to see them. You're happy to see them. And then there's that group of people when they leave the room, you're glad to see them go. You know? So I want to be in that first group.
Those that suck the life right out of you, huh?
They exist among us every day.
You know, I think in my 66 years on this earth, I think I've had one original thought, but that was about it, I think. One original thought. My rule is if I hear something good, I try to give that person credit 3 times.
3 times?
And then after that 3rd time, it's mine.
It's yours. There you go. I've heard that. I don't even know I give 3 times. I repeat it like it's mine, you know. And my big problem is I can't say the same thing twice the same way. So I'll say something maybe 10 times, and all 10 times it's a little different. But if I was to give you the most important life lesson, it would be leave it a little better than you found it.
Amen. I agree with that. All right. It's nice for you guys to join us here. We will be back next week with our next podcast, guys. We got
and thought number 2.
We'll get one more thought from Randy.
I'm glad we got through that. That was good. Hell, this is a lot easier than I thought it was going to be.
All right. I'm going to bust out here. If you could have dinner one time with anybody, who would it be?
That one's easy. I get asked this question every now and then on my lives on TikTok. And my very first answer is the same answer every time now. I would love to be able to sit down at the dinner table with mom and daddy one more time. Just to be there and hear their voice and to share. Because those supper time visits, they're immeasurable. So if I could give you one piece of advice, if you don't listen to anything else in this podcast, if your mom and daddy's still alive, and you might not have had a great relationship with them. I was fortunate. I was very blessed. I had great parents. Now, my daddy didn't come from such a great situation, which you can relate to.
Yep.
But, you know, he made a conscious decision to leave it a little better than he found it, to break that cycle, to be different. And y'all both were blessed to know Burl. You know, he was
amazing.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's real simple. I would sit down at the table with mom and daddy. I'd have some of mama's fried chicken, and it would be a great time.
Amen. For me, it would be my mom.
Yep.
My dad, no, not him, but my mom.
We ate
yes.
several bowls of pinto beans with your mom.
We did. Jordan's Gigi and my mom. Yeah. And pinto beans, sweet tea, and she'd usually have some sliced cantaloupe and some cornbread. And my gosh. All right, here we go. Mom and dad.
Jordo, you can have dinner with one person. Who would it be?
One person?
Yeah.
I feel like mine's going to be different than y'all's. I may get judged.
You might,
no,
but go ahead.
That's fine. You still have your parents.
I know, so that makes it different. If I could have dinner with one person.
See, Jordan didn't know this was coming. So
I know y'all make me look bad on my own show here. We dead or alive?
Yeah,
anybody,
dead or alive,
anybody.
I think it would be.
They can't be fictional.
Okay, I think it'd be Babe Ruth.
Really?
Why? Especially as a kid playing baseball, Babe Ruth was like the ultimate.
Yeah.
He was the big Bambino. He was, as a kid, like obviously never saw him play, but he was like it. Like that was the guy. And then you had the new guys that were still playing and stuff, and you watched him every night. But to a kid, he was so much better, greater. He was the one. And so I think just growing up playing baseball all the time, Babe Ruth was always the one we talked about. I was number 3, like Babe Ruth. So I think that was, growing up, that was just instilled in me through different avenues that maybe built up a little bigger than he was, but,
I think he was a bigger than life figure, even when he was alive.
Now, if I could do family, can I get a second?
You can get a redo.
Can I get a second?
Yeah, number 2.
Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain. I think to be able to pick the brain of a very prolific writer, a visionary, a comedian, a satirist, a gentleman who to this day is making an impact on society through his thoughts, through his written word. Mark Twain would be somebody I would like to get to know and pick his brain.
If I could have one more as well.
Sure.
I would like to have dinner with the president. Not the president, but just any president that's still living. I would enjoy just talking about what it's like being in the White House, what it's like leading the country.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's always something in me I've thought about. And
I met Ronald Reagan.
I know.
And
this was my lead into this.
And Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton multiple times.
He was from Arkansas.
Yep. Yeah. Knew Bill and Hillary before everyone else knew Hillary and Bill. Good and bad with that, right?
Yep.
But probably the president I would want to sit down and have dinner with would be Ronald Reagan. He and Bill Clinton had the same thing. When they looked at you, you felt special.
Yep.
They connected. They had a magnetism. You know, and they're both as different politically as you can imagine, but they had a way of just cultivating and making you feel special in a room of thousands.
Yeah.
They would look at you, they would talk to you, take time. Yeah. Big fan of Reagan.
There's a few people in this world that they can be in a room with 500 people, but when they're talking to you, it's almost like you're the only person in that room. And I think Reagan and Clinton both had that. All right, we're talking about your family, or we were, until we got off on these A, B, C answers. But you know, I've known you a long time, and I've heard you talk about Uncle Grady. Was there any life lessons with Uncle Grady?
Oh, my God, thousands of them. So Daddy coming from a very difficult home, you know, mental, physical, emotional abuse, abandonment, alcoholism, just bad situation. Uncle Grady, who was actually my great uncle, raised my father. So he was my surrogate grandfather. And even back when we were still living in Texas, I would come up and I would spend the summers with Uncle Grady. And that was what got me into the cows and the farm life and
Fishing.
Everything. Fishing, hunting, working. But I'll give you 2 quick lessons. First, every day after we ate dinner, Uncle Grady would stretch out and take a 30-minute nap. Now, I can remember just praying that old man wouldn't wake up so we didn't have to go back out to the field, right? Just sleep an extra 30 minutes. It was just, there was no alarm clock, but we would eat.
He didn't put that on his cell phone alarm?
No. Do you know he didn't have running water in his house until I was 13, 14? No indoor bathroom ever. We bathed in a wash tub. He smoked his own meat. He raised his own pigs and corn and had a milk cow. And I mean, it was, you know, like living back in the 1800s when we went to Uncle Grady's. He finally got a television. One of his buddies was throwing a black and white television out, but it's because the tuner. Remember, Jordan, this is probably too old for you, but there was a time when you had to actually turn a dial to get a channel. Well,
Reagan's looking at you funny while you're saying that.
This dial was wore out, so it wouldn't stay on the channel, so you could not get the reception. So Uncle Grady cut a stick of hickory, whittled one end, and he got it right where it wanted to be, and he wedged it in there. And that's the only channel you watched. You could not change the channel. And that was the TV we had, and that was only the last couple of years he was alive.
So you're saying it was an upgrade when he would wrap the tin foil around the antennas, the rabbit ears?
He actually all he had was a couple of rabbit ears,
right.
and all he got was that one channel. So yeah, it was.
What channel was it?
It was ABC.
ESPN.
Yeah, it was ABC.
Los Arkansas.
Channel 3, ABC. Yeah. The lessons that you've used this line forever, but I actually first heard it and learned it from Uncle Grady. All of his old buddies would come over and they'd be sitting around the potbelly stove and they'd be talking about cougars and mountain lions and bobcats. And, you know, I'm just a big kid. I'm scared to death. And one night one of them said, I tell you what, boy, I'll give you $1 if you go out there to the barn and get an ear of corn out of that corn crib. He always put up dried corn on the cob. That's what he shucked and fed. Well, that barn was way out past the chicken house out there in the dark, and they just talking about them man-eating, cougars. I ain't going out there. So this kept going on, I don't know, several nights in a row, and finally, before they all got over, I mean, it probably built up to $5 or $6 they had on the table if I'd go. And they'd talk about how when a panther screams, it sounds like a woman, it's blood curdling. And I'd actually heard one by that time, so I knew what they was talking about. And I just couldn't make myself go out in the dark. It was beyond my ability. I was so afraid. And before they got over, Uncle Grady said, boy, you can take that flashlight and just shine it out there. I said, yeah, but I won't be able to see the barn. It's too far. And he said, go as far as you can see, and then you can see a little further. I thought about that. So that night they all gathered up, and they're like, hey, okay, I think it got up to like $6. Now, guys, this is back in the early 70s, late 60s.
$6 is like $100 now.
Absolutely. Especially to a little 7, 8-year-old kid, right? So Uncle Grady had kind of told me how to take care of it, so they said it. So I went and got the flashlight, and there was a big debate about whether I could use a light or not, but I think they finally agreed I could use the old 2-cell flashlight. You had to hit the bottom of it to make it come on, I walked out on that front porch, and I shined it, and I could just see to that old walnut tree. Couldn't even see the chicken house. But I remember I shined it all around looking for them bobcats, and I said, okay, I can make it to that tree. I know I'm safe from here to there. When I got to the tree, I could see the chicken house. When I got to the chicken house, I could see the barn. I'll never forget opening that barn door, reaching in there, because there was always rats and possums and everything else. And I grabbed that ear corn, scraped my hand, my knuckles all the way up my arm trying to get it out of that corn crib. But I got me a ear of dried shelled corn. I went running all the way back to the house fast as I could. The life lesson's real simple. You don't know the destination, but just go as far as you can see, and then you can see a little further. And just go as far as you can see, and you can see a little further. Just keep shining that light, and sooner or later you'll get there. And Uncle Grady taught me that.
I love it. I learned that from Zig Ziglar. Zig would always say, go as far as you can see, and when you get there, you'll be able to see a little further. So,
Daddy, for years, said, dig you well before you're thirsty. I was in my 30s when I found out it was a title of a book. Now, I don't know if Daddy had heard it in his childhood. The book, I've often thought, and I need to check that out to see when that book was published.
Hey, Reagan, see if there's a book, Dig You Well Before You're Thirsty.
Oh, there is.
See if it says the publishing date in there.
But my whole life. Daddy always said, it's never wrong to do the right thing. And that stuck with me. Jordo, I had a hot date. And all we had was about 12 acres of hay that we had to rake and bale. And he sent me over early to start raking. Wouldn't take me 30 minutes. And I knew I was supposed to grease the tractor and the hay rake. You didn't get on a piece of equipment till you greased it. But I got a hot date. I want to get this knocked out. I want to get home. I thought, well, it's just 12 acres. He won't know. So I get on the tractor. I get it all raked. About that time he pulls up, he's going to bale it. And he looked at me and said, did you grease that tractor? Well, I didn't know where the grease gun was, so I knew I was walking into a trap, right? And I'd promised myself years ago, which is a complete different story. I'd promised myself I'd never lie to my daddy again. No matter what it cost me, I was going to tell my daddy the truth. Now, my mama, to her dying day, I'd fib to her, but with Daddy, I told him like it was. And he said, Bud, did you grease that tractor and that rake? I said, no, Daddy, I didn't. I got a hot date with Dana. And he looked at me and said, Randy. Now, when he called me Randy, I was in trouble. If he loved me, if it was Bud, son, if he said Randy, he said, Randy, it's never wrong to do the right thing, whether somebody's watching or not, because if you did the right thing. Yes, sir. So, yeah, I had a lot of great lessons from my grandfather, my uncle, my dad. Even my old scoundrel granddaddy, I learned a lot of stuff from him. Like
how not to be?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can I one question? When you first made a commitment to yourself not to lie to Burl, is it one of my favorite stories you tell with the axe?
Yeah.
Well, that was on my list to talk about, so you might as well hit it right now. I think it had something to do with the radiator, didn't it?
Yeah. Y'all gonna make me cry on this one.
Hey, real quick, was there a book?
Yes, it was published in 1997. That's when the year I was born.
1997. Couldn't have been the book that they were looking at back then.
Well, no, my point is, I don't know if he got it from a book. You know, Daddy read, voraciously. He read everything. But, no, I remember him saying that back in the 60s. Dig your well for you're thirsty. Don't sell your mule to buy a plow. First time he said that, I go, what do you mean? He said, son, you're giving this up to try to get that. You don't do that. You know, you build one on top of the other. He just had a bunch of wit and wisdom that way.
Burl was the most well-read guy I might have ever been around. He knew something about everything.
Everything, yeah.
He may not know everything about everything, but he knew something about everything.
You remember when Trivial Pursuit came out? We bought that game and took it to his house. He had never seen it. 5 college graduates. There was one that was a pre-doctorate, about to get their doctorate. There was one master's. The rest of us was bachelor's. I was lucky just to get a bachelor's degree, right? So 5 college-educated people against Daddy. Never won. Now, he might not have known the answer, but he would do stuff like, well, they didn't discover the Galapagos Islands until, so it can't be, you know, I mean, he would reason it out and go, well, it's got to be that. And, you know, I mean, we accused him of having the game somewhere and pre-reading the cards. It was crazy. Yeah, he was very educated.
No, I've been around Burl, was around Burl quite a bit, and he knew something about everything. Okay, radiator, come on.
So I got me an army shovel. You know, the kind that the head folds over and makes an axe. It has a pick, or you can make a shovel. You can fold it down. Bright army green. I'm so proud of this shovel. I'm out there digging foxholes, and I'm chopping trees.
And how old are you now?
Oh, we were still living in Texas, so 5, 6. Daddy had a hobby of restoring Model A and Model T vehicles. And because of that, he always had Model A parts, Model T parts, you know, a spare set of tires, or in this particular case, it was a radiator. And he had advertised it. Back then, there was no internet. It was all in little trade papers. You know, they'd buy them and see who'd swap. And, well, one day I'm walking behind the back of the shop, and I got that shovel in my hand, and as I walked by, the tip of that little green axe part on the shovel hit that radiator. And when it did, water just spurted, just kind of like a water gun. And for the life of me, I don't know why, but it's like I was mesmerized, put in a trance. So I hit it again, and more water squirted. And I hit it again, and more. And you know, a radiator for a vehicle, it's just those little metal delicate fins. And you could just see those green marks where I just chopped it a piece to make it squirt. And all of a sudden, it's like I came out of this trance like, oh, my God, what have you done? And so I did what any little boy would do. I just picked up the radiator and turned it around and put the bad side to the barn. Months go by. Some guy shows up. I can remember it like it's yesterday. I'm barefooted, no shirt. I got on my cowboy hat and a pair of cut-off blue jeans. And I'm totally walking behind Daddy. I'm taking every footstep my hero takes. And he's telling this guy, yeah, I've pressure tested it, and it's held well. It's got water in it. There ain't no leaks. I'm still clueless, Jordo. I don't have a clue where we're headed. We get around to the back of the building, and he goes, it's that radiator right there. And still, I'm just smiling and standing there, you know, everything. And when that man leaned it out, and you could see where I'd chopped up the back, water had leaked out, the man looked at Daddy and said, Mr. Burl, I don't believe I can use this. It hit me then. I realized we got a problem. Now, all my dad did was turn and look at me, and he said, Bud. Didn't call me Randy yet. He said, Bud, did you do that? I can see I'm shuffling on my feet. I'm nervous. I'm afraid. And I did what I think what most kids would have done. I said, no, sir. No, Daddy. Now, that green paint, I mean, I might as well took a marker and wrote, Randy did this and put the date on it, right? My daddy gave me the most disappointed look I've ever seen in my life. He just kind of shook his head, and he said, Randy, all a man ever has is his word. And he turned and looked at that fella with a look of disappointment, shame. And he said, well, I got another one, ain't as good, but it's over. And they just took off walking. And I'm standing there thinking, I didn't get beat. You know, this is it. That's, you know. But for 3 or 4 days, it worked on me what he had said. I couldn't sleep. I just, you know, all a man has is his word. And so Daddy don't know I did that. I got to tell him, you know. Of course he knew. Looking back, he knew. I'll never forget it. He's sitting in that recliner. He's reading something. And I said, Daddy? He said, yeah, Bud. I said, I got to tell you something. He said, what is it? I said, I'm the one tore that radiator up. I chopped on it. And he looked at me and said, I know, Randy. I said, I'm sorry, Daddy. I don't know why I did that. He goes, I understand. You know I'm going to have to spank you. Go to your room. Now, Daddy had a wonderful gift. When he was going to discipline you, he sent you to your room, and he made you think about what you had done, why you were getting in trouble. I later learned it's because his dad would just fly off the handle and scream and holler, so it gave him a chance to calm down, to collect his thoughts. So I'm sitting in the room just knowing, you know, he's about to come in here and toast my honey buns. This is going to be an ugly deal. And dude, you better not be in there playing with G.I. Joes or Legos or, you know, you're sitting there contemplating what you've done wrong. And he would always, every time, make you tell him why you were getting punished. I can remember, Bud, why am I spanking you? I don't know. I didn't do it. Randy, why am I, you know, and he would just keep on. I hit my sister, but she hit me first. You know, no excuse. You never hit a girl. You know, he would logically and calmly explain why this event was about to occur. And then every time, if he said he was going to do it, he did it. He laid you on that bed, and he always used his belt. Never a hand, never a switch, just his belt. And it was never more than 3 or 4 whacks. Now, you felt them, but it wasn't abuse. It was discipline. And then, after I got through kicking and wailing and crying and flopping around, he'd sit back down on the bed, and he would make me hug him. He would hug me. He'd pull me to him. He'd say, son, I do this because I love you. I don't enjoy it. I hope someday you'll understand. I tried to do the same with my kids. But that's a prime example of coming out of a bad situation and deciding to do it a little different, to leave it a little better. But from that day on, after that radiator deal, I told myself I'm never going to lie to my daddy again. He asked me one night, he said, you boys, were y'all out there drinking last night? Yeah, Daddy. Well, who was driving? I told him who, drove. He said, you don't need to be drinking and driving, Bud. I said, I know, Daddy. So even when it hurt, it wasn't 2 hours later, Mama, was y'all drinking? No, ma'am. Mama, we wouldn't have no beer. You know, strange the double standard I had. But yeah, I am a product of some great people. And you're one of those. I have learned so much from you. No, that's a fact.
Just because you're on our podcast don't mean you have to say nice things.
I've even learned from this little crackhead over here. I mean, all this technical stuff. Jordan was showing me the setup. Guys, you've got this figured out. This is impressive. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
We're just happy you're here.
Yeah.
These are little gold nuggets that I hope everybody's taking and listening to. And I hope everybody's enjoying it as much as I am just sitting here listening.
It amazes me that people listen to me, much less enjoy it. But as I look back, there's value, right? There's a lesson. And I'll be honest with you, I've come to believe that there is a lesson in everything in life if we look for it.
Oh, there is. All right. I don't know. I'd have to think through what the lesson is, but I want you to tell your mafia joke.
I don't know.
I just love hearing it. You're
don't
going to
know.
like this, Reagan. This is the real deal here. You got to listen to this
Do
one.
you think we can get away? I don't know if that's politically correct anymore. You think we can get away?
We can get away with it. Shoot, it's our podcast. Jeez.
God, it's been so long since I told it. I don't even remember it. So,
My gosh, if we got to worry about that being politically correct, then nothing would get across. I'm telling you.
so there was this mob boss that was so worried about being ratted out, his people turning on him. He hired him a deaf and dumb accountant. The guy couldn't talk, couldn't hear nothing. And this accountant worked for the mob boss for 20, 30 years. Finally retires. And when they bring in the new accountant for the mob boss, they figure out that this deaf and dumb accountant had embezzled about $6 million. So obviously, the mob boss ain't going to let this pass. He goes and he gets all of his henchmen, his bodyguards, his big old bruisers, and they get an interpreter so they can talk to the deaf and dumb accountant. So they go over there, get him in the middle of the night, drag him out to the barn. They duct tape his body to the chair, and the mob boss says, "Tell him, I know you've embezzled my money. I want it back." And the interpreter goes, "Oh, you better be careful, because the big man says he wants his money." Well, the accountant goes, "I don't know what he's talking about." The mob boss pulls out the gun, cocks the trigger, and says, "Tell him, I'm going to pull the trigger if you don't tell me where my $6 million is." So the interpreter says, Oh, he says he's going to shoot you if you don't tell him where the $6 million is. Well, the deaf and dumb accountant can't take it no more, right? He breaks. He goes, No, don't let him kill me. Tell him the $6 million is buried behind my house. The mob boss goes, "What'd he say?" The interpreter goes, "He don't believe you'll pull that trigger."
We even got a laugh out of Reagan over there, huh?
The life lesson is be careful who you let interpret things for you, right?
Yes. I got one more that's not even on my notes, but it just hit me. Some little man standing at the top of the stairs.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that story has probably made me millions, and it truly happened. Look, never let the facts get in the way of a good story, right? I mean, that's rule number one. But this one, it's pretty much verbatim. I've been blessed with 3 children. Our youngest, Tanner, when he was 3 or 4 years old, he started that deal where he was afraid to go to bed, right? I'm scared. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. I got to use the bathroom. Any excuse. He didn't want to go to sleep. And so I finally decided, okay, I need to fix this, right? So I take him upstairs. We say our prayers. I tuck him in bed, and I say, "Now, look, I don't want to hear a peep. You go to sleep." I ain't even made it out the door. He goes, "Daddy, I'm thirsty." I said, "No, son, you should have got a drink before we got in bed. Now we ain't playing this game." Turn off the light. I don't even make it halfway down the stairs when I hear, "Daddy, I'm thirsty." I go back in there. I flip that light on. I'll never forget it. I walked over. I flipped them covers back. I said, "I'm going to toast them honey buns. I am going to whoop you if you don't go to sleep. We ain't doing this. I don't care if you're thirsty or not." By this time, he's kind of crying. And I thought, no, I've solved this. I had no more got settled down in that recliner. I just about to turn on the TV, and I hear, Daddy, I'm thirsty." I come up out of that chair like one of them kung fu movies. I'm mad now. He's going to pay the price. When I came around the corner of the living room and I got to the bottom of the stairs, there stood that little 4-year-old man at the top of the stairs. He had got out of bed. He had walked to the top of the stairs. There he stands with his hands on his hips, looking down at me and said, "Daddy, on your way up here to whoop me, would you bring a glass of water?" And he was dead serious. And the life lesson I've taught for years is, how thirsty are you? Are you willing to pay the price? And Tanner taught me that. And there's value there. Sometimes you got to take a beating to get what you want. Sometimes you got to pay a price. So how bad do you want it? How thirsty are you?
Yeah. You know, I've heard you say several times that used to, when I'd walk into a room, I'd be looking around to see if anybody would talk to me. Now I walk into a room and I look to see if there's anybody I want to talk to. Kind of give the life lesson in that.
I think we all, to some degree, have insecurities, disabilities, handicaps, scars. One of the things that surprises most people about me is I'm an introvert. I'm a natural-born introvert. I get real uncomfortable in one-on-one situations where it starts to get personal and or just 2 or 3 people. If it's a big group, and I can just kind of pat them on the back and, hey, how you doing? Good to see you, and just move through. I'm comfortable. And I think it's because I really struggled in school. I mean, I didn't know I was dyslexic till I was in my 40s. Didn't even dawn on me. Matter of fact, until we had Tanner diagnosed, as the doctor's reading off the stuff, Marcy kept looking at me going, that's you. So anyway, I just knew I couldn't spell, couldn't memorize anything to this day. Jordo, I give you my word, if you put a gun to my head and ask me to tell you what 7 times 8 is, I couldn't do it unless you let me start counting on my fingers and work up to it. Memorization, sounding words out. What's that called? Phonics? Hooked on phonics? No, spelling. Oh my God.
Hooked on.
So I really thought I was slow. I know that surprises y'all, right? I'm dumb. I'm stupid. I can't do this. And I'll never forget. Mama set me down and she goes, Randy, you are not dumb. You just have to do things different than other people. There's different ways. And the way she learned that is, if you gave me my spelling words in the exact same order every time, never missed it. But if you jump from word 1 to word 4 and then try to go back to word 2, you done scrambled my eggs. There ain't no way I'm going to get, And so I just had to learn. I had to work a little harder. I hated to read in public. I would count ahead, how many kids in front of me till it got my turn. And then I'd look at what I'm supposed to read. Okay, he's doing that paragraph. She's doing that one. Okay, so this is mine. And then if somehow the teacher jumped around, it was over. I mean, I was just... So I think because of those insecurities early on, I became the class clown, If I make fun of myself, maybe they won't make as much fun of me. And so that just kind of naturally led into the jokes and the storytelling. And I didn't misbehave. I didn't overact, but made fun of myself before they could make fun of me. So I always have been a people pleaser. I've always wanted people to like me. And at some point I realized, there are going to be people who don't like you no matter, Randy. And I've come to learn that we all have insecurities. We all have, I can stand in front of 40,000 people and make them laugh, make them cry. I can get the room so quiet you can hear a pin drop. I can control that group. But you put me with a brand new person that I don't know and I got to talk to them more than 5 or 10 minutes, it's misery. So one of the greatest gifts I gave myself was, only people I really care about are the people I care about. Some stranger, some troll on the internet. Look, if I could give you, this is a free bonus lesson. Quit worrying about what people say. Quit worrying about what people type on your TikTok or in your Instagram. They ain't paying your bills. They're not building your dreams. They don't even know you. And their opinion should never affect you. Now, if it's someone I love, like you, if it's someone I value and they say something, then I'm going to be introspective. I'm going to look at, okay, maybe do I need to change that? Am I wrong? And even at times, even if Marcy tells me something, I'm going to weigh it, but I still might disagree. And that was the greatest gift when I finally decided, instead of trying to please everyone, right? Instead of trying to wonder if they like me, just walk in the room and say, I wonder who the hell in here I'm going to like. Is there anybody in here I even want to spend time with? And man, Life got a lot easier.
So you got Reagan, Jordo, and me. Anybody in here you can hang out with? Is it okay?
Without question, it would be Reagan.
Be Reagan. Well, I understand.
Or as I officially know her, Megan.
That's right.
I called you Megan for the first, 3 months?
Yeah, and I talked about Bailey to him, and he kept calling her Katie.
Well, he just went over. He's dyslexic, so I mean, now you know why.
Hey, did you know that the two biggest groups of dyslexics, you know what they are? Now, this is true. You can go look. You can look this up. You ready? The two biggest groups of dyslexics, they're either prison inmates or multimillionaires. That's a fact. And I've come to believe, and I know this, that it's because they made the decision early on, either I can't do this, I'm stupid, I'm a failure, or I got to work harder. I got to figure out a better way of doing it. I've got my own system. That whole attitude, they both had the same disability, but by far, population-wise, dyslexics, there's more dyslexics in prison or very, very successful multimillionaires.
Oh, I'm glad you turned out to be a millionaire as opposed to be a prison inmate.
I could have ended up in prison pretty easy.
Yeah. My gosh.
Could you?
Could I
there,
have?
but the
Yes.
grace of God go I.
Yeah. I mean, we all got the potential to be a millionaire, and we all got the potential to end up in prison. All right, I'm going to ask you one more, and then we'll give you a chance for some closing thoughts. I've heard you say that you made millions from mowing yards.
I made millions from the lessons I learned mowing yards.
All right. Let us hear, because we want to make
The
millions
lessons.
from these lessons
Yeah.
too. Then,
Oh, geez, this is a long story. Y'all sure?
well, you can whittle it down a little bit. I mean,
So Daddy and Uncle Bill were contractors, and on the weekends they built little spec houses, rent houses, and they'd rent them out, get the capital gains, and then sell them. And I worked for them for a little while, and I realized I don't make a good laborer, right? People bossing me around. So I knew early on I wanted to be my own boss. So I went to Daddy and I said, hey, I want to make some money. He said, why? I said, well, there's a 10-speed bike. Do you ever have a 10-speed?
oh yeah.
I wanted that 10-speed bike so bad. So Daddy said, well, you could mow yards. That sounded like something. And at this time, Jordo, we still lived down in Texas in a little subdivision. And he said, I'll let you use the push mower and my new weed eater. Now, weed eaters had just come out. And you know Burl, he loved mechanical stuff. So the fact I could use a weed eater was a big deal. Well, I talked myself into it that, okay, I can mow yards. I said, well, whose yard am I going to mow? Can I mow yours? He goes, no, you mow mine for free. You know? He said, why don't you go ask Mr. Thompson? Now, this subdivision, Mr. Thompson had actually built it. He was the rich man in the subdivision, right? Drove a Cadillac. And his house, because he developed the subdivision, his yard was probably about 6 or 7 lots compared to the other single lot. I mean, it was huge. He lived right there on the corner as soon as you turned in off Ford Road on Forest Trail, Mr. Thompson. I said, okay, well, do you think he'll let me? Will you talk to him? He goes, no, you got to go ask him. So now I got to walk down to this man's house and knock on his door and ask him if I can mow his yard. And Mr. Thompson was always a little scary looking to me because he always wore dress slacks. I mean, even in the summer, winter, day, and he is retired, but he wore dress slacks, a white Oxford shirt, always had on a tie, and then like a Hugh Hefner smoking jacket, right? It might be velour or silk, and he had these slide-on house shoes. They were like leather on the outside. That's the way he dressed. Had the little pinky ring, and always had that big cigar. I knock on his door, and here he comes, dressed just like I described him. I said, Mr. Thompson, can I mow your yard? I don't know how I got the words out. And he looked at me, I'll never forget, he said, well, what will you charge me? I hadn't even thought that far ahead. I don't know. I'm clueless. So I give God the credit, just grace of God. I said, well, I tell you what. I didn't even say that. I said, you just pay me whatever it's worth. Let me mow it, and you pay me whatever it's worth. And I'll never forget, he puffed on that cigar a minute, and he looked at me and kind of smiled. He said, that sounds like a deal. You come back tomorrow and mow it. So I go running home. I tell Daddy, Mr. Thompson said I could mow his yard. I'm all excited. So Daddy shows me how to make sure that the mower's got oil, and, so I get it all ready. Go down there the next day. I start mowing the yard, and it is a big yard. And I'm mowing it. And I get over in the corner, and evidently whoever been mowing it in the past was just throwing the limbs in the corner right up against the pond. And so it's just this big pile of old debris and brush, and they hadn't mowed it. Weeds are growed up. And if Daddy ever taught me one thing, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing right. So I went down to Daddy and Uncle Bill's shop, and I got a wheelbarrow, came up there, loaded up all that trash, had to make 2 or 3 trips, and then I mowed the weeds down, right? I've got the whole yard mowed, and I'm looking around, and that subdivision, down there just north of Houston, the land's kind of low, so they dig dirt up to build the foundations up. So they'd kind of made a pond. They called it the lake. But it was just an old pond out there. Some places would be 3 foot deep, and other places would be 40 foot deep, depending on the dirt. Well, his place backed up to the pond, and it had a retaining wall. Between the retaining wall and the water, a bunch of them old tall water weeds had grown up. It is dry for about 4 foot there, and them weeds was poking up above that wall. And I thought, you know what? I bet I could cut them down. But I knew better than to use Daddy's new weed eater down in that mud and water. So I go back to the shop. I get the sling blade. Do you know what that is, son? So I get down there, and I'm whacking away, and I'm about halfway through, and I hear, that ain't part of my yard. And I turn and look, and there stands Mr. Thompson. And I went, no, sir. He said, why are you doing that? I said, well, I thought it would look better. If I got these weeds down, you could see the lake, He went, I'll never forget. He went, huh. Turned around, walked off. I'm like, oh, my goodness. Am I in trouble? But I was halfway done, so I went ahead and finished it. My OCD wouldn't let me stop. So I take the sling blade back. I get Mama's broom. I go down there. I sweep off his sidewalk. And I'm probably 2 days in on this job. I knock on the door. I said, Mr. Thompson, I'm done. He comes walking out, and he said, well, let's look it over. We come around the corner. He goes, where'd all them limbs go? I said, well, I hauled them off so I could mow where they were. He went, huh? Who told you to do that? Nobody. Why'd you cut them weeds? That's terrible.
That was in the contract that you turn your cell phone off when you start, but that's all right. Jeez.
You can edit.
In post.
So in post. So he said, who told you to haul them limbs off? I said, nobody, Mr. Thompson. I just thought it'd look better. Why'd you cut them water weeds? Well, same reason. You ain't got to pay me, Mr. Thompson. I'm just trying to do a good job. He said, So we finished walking around. He said, you swept off all the sidewalks? I said, yes, sir. He reached in his pocket and he pulled out a billfold. That thing, it was fat. It wouldn't even close, right? And he reaches in there and he pulls out $100 bill. And he goes, here you go, bud. He didn't call me bud. Here you go, son. And I'm like, Mr. Thompson, I can't take that. That's too much money. I mean, we're talking back in 72, 73. He said, no, we had a deal. You take it. So I go home and I tell Daddy, look, Mr. Thompson paid me a $100 bill. And Daddy said, that's too much. I said, Daddy, I tried to give it back. Come to find out, years later, Daddy told me he went down there and told him, Mr. Thompson, you can't pay him that. He said, Burl, me and that boy had an agreement. You stay out of it. But when he handed me that $100 bill, Jordo, he said, you come back and do that every 2 weeks. $100. So I'm thinking, I'm going to get rich. So my next yard, and this is the important life lesson, is real simple. Let your customer decide what you're worth. Always do more than expected. Go above and beyond, and it'll pay you every time. Now, I thought that was a mistake when I got my second yard. It was an old widow lady lived down the street. I went to her house, knocked on the door. Can I mow your yard? Sure. How much you going to charge me? Whatever you think it's worth. Same routine. I've learned, right? I ain't bright, but I know how to repeat, rinse and repeat. She said, well, that sounds like a good deal. I mowed her yard, and it was just a small, regular yard. You know, I was expecting $5, $10. That'd be about the going rate, especially, you know, Mr. Thompson gave me $100. Man, I did as good a job. I weeded her flowers, everything. Knocked on the door, and she comes out, and she just goes on and on about how great a job I did. And she hands me $3. And I know she could see it on my face. I was just heartbroken because compared to what I had just got. I went home. I told Daddy, I said, she cheated me. And they said, whoa, what do you mean? Didn't you tell her whatever she thought it was worth? I said, yes, sir. He said, son, have you ever thought about it's harder for her to get that $3 than Mr. Thompson to get $100? I said, no, sir. He said, you made a deal. You're going to stand by it. So I'd go down there and mow her yard for $3. But you know, something strange happened. She had a bunch of friends. And she started telling her friends about this little yard mowing redneck. And I bet you she brought me 6, 7, 10 customers. The life lesson's real simple, guys. Give more than expected. Let your customer decide what you're worth. And if you give your word, if you've agreed to a deal, you stick it through. And it'll pay off in the long run. Yeah. That yard mowing, and there's 3 more chapters of that story about investing and buying, but the bottom line is I was blessed because I've had people in my life like my daddy, Uncle Grady, Presley Swaggerty, Jordan Swaggerty. You can learn just about from anybody.
Amen.
I've never heard that story.
So, you know, Burl liked to tinker, right? So after I get these yards, he convinces me I need a riding mower. Well, another neighbor had a riding mower where the engine blew up. Back then when they shipped them, they didn't put oil in them. It was just real light shipping oil. So he ran it about 10 minutes, it blew up. So Daddy said, well, why don't you go down there and see if he'll see that mower and we can put a new motor on it. Years later, I found out Daddy had visited with him and worked this deal out. He had not talked to Mr. Thompson. That was all on my own. But Daddy had already talked to Harvey about his blowed-up mower. So he told me he'd sell it to me. I forget how much. But it needed a motor. And I didn't have the money to buy a new motor to go on it. So Daddy and Uncle Bill loaned me the money out of their business. And I bought a vertical shaft, 8 horsepower, Briggs & Stratton. Daddy helped me put it on there. And I'll never forget it. I owed them $800. That was my business note. And they made me sit down and tell them what I was going to do with the money. I mean, I went through the process. Didn't have to submit no papers, but I guess they knew I couldn't ride it out if I had to. Anyway, I still ain't got this 10-speed bike. Every dollar I get, Daddy's making me upgrade, invest, get better. I had to buy my own weed eater. He wouldn't let me keep using his, said I was going to wear it out. So I've got about $800 saved. Man, it wasn't quite that. It's probably about $700. But I just had to have that bike. So I went to Daddy and I said, hey, here's half my note. And he goes, is that all you got? I said, no, sir, I'm going to buy that 10-speed. He said, no, you ain't. I said, what do you mean? He said, you pay your business bills before you buy toys. I said, Daddy, it ain't a toy. I need it to ride to school. And I tried to justify it. He said, nope, that ain't the way it works. So he made me keep about $100 out of it for operating expenses. And then I had to carry the rest of it across the street to Uncle Bill because, he was part of the deal. Uncle Bill used to tell this story. He said, I come across that street. He said, you could see his lip dragging. He was so down and depressed. And I knocked on the door. I said, Uncle Bill, Day said I had to give you this money. I'm sure I was mad, about to cry, whatever. Next morning, Daddy, and I didn't know this till later, Daddy and Uncle Bill get in the truck. And Uncle Bill looked at Daddy and said, Burl, we'll loan that boy anything he needs, but don't you ever send him over to pay me back. But, to learn to scale and to invest in yourself and to improve, to pay your debts.
But did you ever get the bicycle?
I did. It had the ram horns, had the shifters. Man, I don't know what happened to that bike, but yeah, I got the bike.
You got anything for Mr. Hedge here? I mean, we've had.
I know this is just fun.
I know it. I could do this all night.
I think all of us would agree our favorite times is deer season, and we literally sit around and do the same thing with no microphones and just hang out and talk, and that's kind of what this reminds me of.
It is definitely story time there at deer camp.
The lights aren't as bright there, but
No. And I think there's value. I mean, if you go back in our history of mankind, right, the retelling of stories, the passing down from generation to generation, and it's something I'm afraid we're losing a little bit as a society, those lessons. And it all goes back to the breakup of the home, You need a daddy. You need a mama. And I'm going to tell you right now, the best gift you can give your kids is more time. Not more toys, not more money, more time.
No, I tell people, give them half the money and spend twice the time all the time. That's
Amen.
it. It's funny talking about deer camp. It's like I remember when we first started coming to deer camp, we were the young bucks.
Oh,
I mean, we were the young bucks. Now we're the old farts there at the place.
I don't know how this is a podcast just telling these goofy stories, but if I gotta tell my embarrassing
are we going
stories,
lean this way?
come on, Jordo. I want to hear.
We need Toby here.
I want to hear the story about the first time on the 4-wheeler.
Okay.
And your discovery of what a food plot was.
Oh, you guys got to remember that Presley is very city and Randy is very country. And so when I was a kid, it was getting me off of the out of the concrete jungle and introducing me into the forest a little bit. And we lived at that point in time, we lived in a neighborhood. We lived on Kingsbridge. So it was, we had a big size lot. It was probably half an acre, but it wasn't like we had 4-wheelers and stuff like that. So I was so excited. Was this the first year I was there?
The very first year. Yeah.
Probably first day.
I don't remember that.
It had to be. We had to go. But I at deer camp, Randy always brought the 4-wheelers. This is before the Polaris ATVs and the mules and all that, and you're just on 4-wheelers. And I get there. I'm so excited to ride. And before I get to the food plot, you send me up on that one with no brakes.
It had brakes. They just weren't top of the line. Yeah.
They weren't working. And I nearly go off a hill. And I go down a hill. I probably went down 5 feet and just squared up a big tree to stop it. And so that's my first, that's my first 5 minutes on this 4-wheeler. And I should have taken the note. And then we're like, okay, we get it out of there and we're going to go check feeders. That's, put corn in them. They throw the corn out for the deer, and you just go and make sure they're topped off and ready to go for deer season. And it's we rent or lease from Weyerhaeuser, which is big, just tall trees. The whole thing is just tall trees, unless they clear cut it. I mean, trees are everywhere, so there's not a bunch of big open pastures outside of just the roads through camp. So we get to, it was at the Hilton, correct? We get to probably one of the most famous stands on our, you can call it famous, most memorable stands at the deer lease. And, we're going through the trees, and I mean, they're, I'm a kid at this point. They seem 200 feet tall. And we finally come out, and I see we at that point in time, they're still planting food plots. So, I mean, it looked like just plush green grass that was just, it was calling my name. And I take that 4-wheeler and I just rip it down this. And it must have rained a little bit that week because it was just kind of soft. It wasn't muddy, but it was kind of soft. And I'm just letting those back tires go left, go right. And I whip it down at the end and bring it back and pull back right up to Randy. And Randy just goes, "Son, that's a food plot. We don't go riding the 4-wheelers in the food plots." I said, "Yes, sir." Noted.
He was out there doing donuts and slinging mud, and all of us, the rest of us, sitting up here on the 4-wheeler and watching.
Is he ever going to come back? Do we have to go get him? Oh,
I love that story.
we could do a deer camp podcast because there's so many.
Oh, it would
So many
It would
stories.
take days.
You know,
Days.
we'll have to do that. That would be
That
fun.
would be fun.
We'll do that. Not today. We're coming to the end here, but we'll
Hey,
have to do that.
What you got to do is bring some of this to camp.
Yeah. Load
No,
up
I'm not
all
talking
these-
about lights and stuff, but think about it. A couple of cameras. And
the mics?
and a couple mics and getting you and Toby telling the
God.
stories, lean this way, getting Ty telling stories. Oh, Presley, that would be. Hey,
That'd be the most technology that camp's ever seen.
that would be true. Very, very true. Yeah, we are technology.
Yeah, I understand,
deprived.
guys. It's a rustic camp, and there's no TVs, there's no radios, there's no anything. So
No cell service. A little bit of cell
little-
service now.
if you-
It's growing, but
spots. You got to
Yeah.
find a spot though. It's kind of spot cell
Got to get up
service.
on top of the hill. Yeah.
so
Well, all right.
well, episode 33 in the books.
Episode 33 in the books.
We got more coming y'all's way
Yeah.
with the one and only Randy Hedge.
I have to believe
The
this-
man.
I have to believe this has to be like the worst podcast y'all have ever had.
It'll be one of the best.
I can't see that. I just
It will,
All right.
won't it, Reagan? But this will be a good podcast, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that was a little different. Yours was serious
Yeah,
stuff.
you're
not
making money.
story,
You're making
you know.
money.
I didn't laugh. I don't maybe laughed once. You guys were laughing. It was good.
We'll see.
It was good. Reagan says it was good.
All right.
Reagan is our production manager, guys, if y'all wondering. So she's making sure we're looking good over here.
Well, I don't even know how to close this thing. That was just such a fun time.
Yeah. Well, all right. Tell them. Is there anything business-wise we need to tell them?
Not business-wise, guys. Like we said, we're doing a four episode series with Randy here because he has graciously driven in from D. Queen, Arkansas, to give us a little bit of time, and we've been so excited to get him on here because we know everybody will love him and as much as we do, and you know,
That pitch is TikTok.
yes. And we'll do that to start next time.
Yeah.
Go check out Randy Hedge Wealth Mindset, correct? On TikTok. He just has a small little following of 250,000 followers. 250,000 followers?
Yeah. I can't believe it. I started it as a whim, didn't see any value. Matter of fact, even after it started growing, I like, but it has.
I told you from the very beginning TikTok was the way to go.
Don't even. That's next episode. I promise you. You're going to hear that story.
Next episode, guys, we're gonna dive deeper into how he has become so successful on TikTok and let him give some ins and outs and what to do if you're interested, because I know so many people are interested in growing social media, whatever platform it is, and this is really self-taught. I know as of late you started, talking to professionals in the field, but starting out, I mean, pretty much self-taught.
Yeah.
To become a massive success and have life-changing income off of it. So that is episode 34, guys. Thank you for tuning in. As always, thank you, the one and only Cowboy, for coming in, and luckily we get to keep him here for a little while longer.
Love you.
Love you too. Thank you, guys.